Good evening. This is the call to order of the special call Board of Aldermen meeting / public hearing at the Salado Municipal Building, 301 North Stagecoach Road in Salado, Texas. The date is August 26, 2024, and the time is 6:30 p.m. Ms. Bean, please call the roll.
Let the record show all clear.
Thank you. As we begin this Board of Aldermen meeting, let us take a moment to reflect on our shared commitment to serve the diverse community of the Village of Salado. We invite all present, regardless of faith, belief, or philosophy, to join us in a spirit of unity, respect, and compassion. May our deliberations be guided by wisdom, our decisions rooted in fairness, and our actions driven by the common good. Whether you find inspiration in a higher power, the bonds of humanity, or the wonders of nature, let us work together to build a culture where every voice is heard and every individual is valued. Let's take a moment, please. Thank you. Please join me and stand in the Pledge of Allegiance and salute the Texas flag. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic which stands one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Honor the Texas flag. Pledge allegiance to the flag, one nation under God, one indivisible. Item 1 on the agenda is public comments. The Board of Aldermen welcomes comments from citizens on issues and items of concern not on the agenda. Those wishing to speak must sign in before the meeting begins and observe a 5-minute time limit when addressing the board. Speakers will have one opportunity to speak during this time period. Speakers desiring to speak on an agenda item will be allowed to speak when the agenda item is called. Inquiries about matters not listed on the agenda will either be directed to staff or placed on a future agenda for Alderman consideration. First in the gate, Mr. Jim Boynton. Where'd he go? Jim Boynton. We'll go on to the next one. Zane Kennedy, you want to speak now or on the agenda item? Okay, thank you, sir. Anybody else wish to speak? Mr. Boynton.
My name is Jim Boynton, 3565 FM 2843 in Salado. I'm going to refer to this in a minute to kind of explain what's going on here. For myself, I keep hearing a lot of angst about a budget shortfall. I want to remind everybody, we had a completely different council that was backing all the corruption going on before this council. Understand that this disaster was created by the former mayor and the former city manager. We've talked around things, thrown out bad numbers. We've done all sorts of things that we could pursue, probably corruption charges against the former city manager. The problem with it is there's lots of different ways to look at this budget. I've had people that have gone to church with the former mayor defend his actions and say, I don't care if he's corrupt, I'm still voting for him. That's a horrible statement to hear from people that are supporting the former mayor. And with him supporting the former city manager, that's what you get. You get this disaster. What I'd like to point you out to is on the first page, it's how Don Ferguson, when we were trying to put a sewer in, kept the sewer from us. I've talked to Jason, I've talked to the mayor, other people that are aware of this. If you'll look on this first page, he's talking about what we should do and shouldn't do, but he wasn't letting me talk to the city engineer. All this was a conversation that was edited by him. One of the things, if you'll look on this thing, it was talking about what size of line we were going to run, and he's trying to tell us we need to run 6 instead of 4. We were always going to do that. He was putting his fingers in the way and trying to do everything to keep us from putting that in. One of the things right after that, if you'll look, it says PVC can be used, but we prefer ductile line. I'll bet you if you ask the city manager or anybody that puts in sewer systems, they put in PVC. They don't put in ductile iron. They haven't in 50 years. On the next page, he's over here. This legend was sent by my son to them to show them what we were going to do. The green indicates 6-inch pipe. He's chastising my son for putting in 4. The only 4-inch pipe there is what comes out of the house. That's what comes out of all of them. It does. It's continual corruption and looking the other way. And I'll just point this out. A lot of these shortcomings, go to the next page. He sent us in this deal. This next page is a piece of plumbing, and he wants the piping like that. If you'll look at that, that's all pressurized with rods in it for pressurized systems, not drain systems. That is very expensive. What he was trying to do is cost us money. I've spoken out multiple times about all this corruption that's gone on by the city manager and the former mayor. We've had people, without ever listening to what's being said, vote blindly to support them to. And it's certainly not some of these guys that are on the board at this time. There's a couple of them that are there. But we all saw in public meetings how the former mayor turned on somebody for holding him accountable. We've all seen it. The last one is a certificate of occupancy. If you look on this, it says right under use classification, storage only. There's not a classification on a residence for that. I got taxed on this house that had no sewer, that all I could do is put the furniture in it. I needed a C of O of some sort. Even though we couldn't let my daughter move in, we needed a C of O to put her stuff in there because he had held it up for a year. So you think this little old tax increase you're seeing, after the corruption that's gone on and the backing of individuals in this town, now y'all are getting to pay for it. And it's because it's continuous. Back there's a box. Now look at that box back there. That box is full of documents that I got from the city on open records request showing the corruption that's gone on for the last 15 years. It's right there. I've offered it.
Thank you. Any other public comments? We'll move on to item 2, workshop. Sub-item A, proposed fiscal year 2025 operating budget. Mr. De La Rosa, if you want to kick this off.
Okay. Good evening, Mayor, Alderman. What I did is based on the last Thursday's meeting when we had the public hearing, there was a lot of discussion. It's a public hearing, and the Mayor Pro Tem did point it out, but again, there was no objection by the rest of the aldermen. So what I did for this meeting, I went ahead and put in a workshop. This allows you much more flexibility to be able to discuss the budget, both the tax rate and the operating budget. Keep the conversation, keep it fairly fluid, and you can certainly have much more than just a discussion on it. You can go into any line item you wish at this point. Okay, Mayor?
Thank you. Alderman Graham, you have anything you want to add to that, or you have any questions for Mr. Del Rosa?
I don't.
Alderman Hurst? Alderman McDonald?
I do. Good evening, Mayor, Board of Aldermen, Mayor Pro Tem. Last week I discussed a line item known as 5051, which is the Hotel Occupancy Tax Fund. At which point in time, just to preface those who were unable to be here or were unable to watch a recorded video provided by Mr. Newman, I believe, or the YouTube page that was available for us at the time. In simple language terms, line item 5051 is funded by the hotel occupancy tax, kindly known as the hot tax. And that amount of money of $18,204 goes towards paying for 2 office spaces for our functional touring and marketing department for the Village of Salado, whose specific mission is to basically put heads in beds and bring people to the community. Kind of big picture stuff. In addition with that information, I also discussed the fact that based on the fair market value of commercial space in our community right now, it's roughly between $20 and $30 a square foot. However, based on the square actual footage of the offices in and of themselves, you're looking at about $121.36 a square foot. All right, that's about 4 to 5 times the market value. Now, I also stated earlier that as an alderman, we're supposed to be good stewards of everybody's tax money, not just your property tax money, not just your sales tax money, but all the money, all tax. And because by act or merit or lack of transparency or whatever the conversation is, we're in a hucklebuck now. However, as an alderman, my responsibility above all is also to look at the line items and determine if there's anything on there that we can live without. It has nothing to do with organizational setup. It has everything to do with what can we do with that money that it could better serve than paying 4 to 5 times the fair market value of rent space. All right. So, Board of Aldermen, Mayor, I would like to have an open discussion, but look at possible alternate opportunities to be able to provide functionally our team that manages that responsibility as far as the marketing, heads and beds piece, tourism, and I would like to have a conversation openly with the community what's involved if necessary. If they choose to comment regarding the potential of not approving that line item, so we don't give ourselves a position of allowing ourselves to continuing that agreement with the Chamber of Commerce organization of itself. So thank you for giving me that time. I'd be happy to take any conversation that you would have or thoughts.
Okay, I'm going to open this up. Oh, I was about to. I'm gonna wait another 10 minutes now. Pause that line item and come back to it. No, I'm just kidding. Yeah, I'm gonna open it up now to public comments if anybody wants to get up and speak.
Tim Fleischer, 912 Cedar Park Circle. I have been a director of the Chamber of Commerce 4 different times. I've been a president or chairman of it 2 different times. The move of the visitor center to the Salado Museum was the best move for a visitor center. And Alderman McDonald, with due respect, you're not being fully honest about the space. You're not. Nor are you being fully honest about the partnership between the Chamber of Commerce and Tourism. They support each other. They answer the phones when someone else is not there, whether it is a tourism director or the tourism marketing manager, or whatever term you want to put on that person at this time, they cooperate with each other. Not only that, if you look at the 7 things that tourism and hotel, motel taxes can be spent on, one of the principal things that those taxes can be spent on is museums. If you need me to, I'll go Google it and I'll give you the line item. But tourism and hotel motel taxes can be spent on historic properties, museums, and visitor centers. What you have directly across from the Stagecoach Inn, what you have within a block of the most vibrant part of our community is a visitor center. That whole property is used by hotel motel taxes. It's not just 2 offices. And anyone who tells you that is not being honest.
Thank you, sir. Anybody else? Mr. Street? You promised me too before the meeting, but here we are.
My name is Daryl Street. I live at 859 Northridge Road, Salado, Texas. I would remind the council, everybody here, that unless things have drastically changed, hotel tax is a designated tax. It cannot be put in the general fund. It cannot be used for anything but what it's designated for. They are specific and they are governed by state and your audit government. So all I would say is the funds that come in from hotel motel tax should be used exactly like the law requires. And I think you guys have heard that, but I didn't know if people here would know that you cannot put that money in the general fund and devote it to everything. Is that correct?
Linda Reynolds, 1110 Mill Creek Drive. I'd like to defend Alderman McDonald a little bit on this deal. This deal of renting the museum is a question mark in my mind too. It began back in the Skip Lancet, Fred Brown regime. Fred Brown decided to take the chamber into the village, and he took all their money and fired the chamber head at the time, I think Debbie Charbonneau, and that money just kind of disappeared into the budget, in my memory. This is my memory. And people were in the chamber were a little upset when they discovered coming into the village didn't mean they were going to be better off. It meant something happened with a lot of their funds. So at some point, I believe it was David Forthout, who doesn't live in the village but ran the chamber at the time, came up, and a bunch of chamber people came and started to argue with the village about their money, their funds. And they decided they wanted to separate again from the village. This is all years before Mr. McDonald even lived in town, or any of you probably lived in town. So there was a contract. I'm curious to know, when does the contract renting the museum space end, if it does? And I'm also curious to know, because I cannot figure it out yet. I know the museum is a 5013C. I know the tourism money is for certain things. But I believe the building all of that exists in is privately owned. There are no taxes that that business pays, that building pays. But it seems to me like the Robertsons still literally own the building. So I'm wondering, where our $18,000, who does that go to? And how long is the contract? And is it forever? Thank you.
With this being a workshop, we can speak to this.
Yes, sir.
Ms. Reynolds, that contract is up for renewal now. No, I'm telling you, I'm answering your question. The contract is up for renewal currently. We've been in discussion about either a 3-year contract or a year-to-year contract, and we're still in those conversations. We really haven't decided what we're going to do yet. That's why we're having these conversations. Anybody else? Go ahead. Go ahead. We're not going to make it argumentative, though. Let's don't do that.
David Swarthout has never been in charge of the Chamber of Commerce. That's one. Number two, the Robertson family has no ownership of the museum property. It is owned by the Salado College, by the Salado Museum and College Hill Park Foundation, which is indeed a 501c3. The agreement entered into is that the chamber rents the space from the college foundation and in return leases space, subleases to the Village of Salado to establish the visitor center. The Chamber of Commerce makes a very small profit on what they sublease to the visitor center and hotel motel. That was found to be the most expedient way for it to happen. If it's not the most expedient way for it to happen, then the lease agreement needs to be rewritten to where the Village of Salado Tourism is the lessee and the chamber is the sublessee. That's all that needs to happen. The Robertson family, again, for the record, Robertson family has no ownership of that property, period.
Thank you. Anybody else? Anybody else on the board have any comments or questions on that item A? No. Okay, we'll move on to item B and the proposed tax rate. Mr. Del Rosa, you want to speak to that? Do you have anything?
I'd rather not, Mayor.
Okay. The proposed tax rate is an increase to 48.6 cents, up from 39.47 cents per $100 evaluation, in order to fund the proposed fiscal year 2025 budget. So with that, I will open it up to the board for comments or questions, beginning with Alderman Graham.
I have none.
Alderman Hurst.
I have none.
Alderman McDonald.
Yes, Mayor. Just some general conversation. And this is going to be to Mr. Del Rosa. Mr. Del Rosa, if a citizen in the community of Salado, if they don't like this tax rate, what can they do to say they don't like the tax rate? How do they establish they do not like the tax rate, or how can they challenge the tax rate?
Well, without giving legal advice.
Right.
Voters can file a petition to stop the movement, or even after the action is taken. I don't recall the number of days, but depending on when it's received, will determine whether it gets to the November 2024 election, yes, sir, or the May 2025 election.
Okay. Thank you for answering my question. No further questions. Thank you, Mayor.
Hey, Pro Tem Bell. All right, I'm going to open this up to public comments as well. Come on up. Name and address for the record, please.
Mike French, 201 Carriage House Road, Salado, Texas. A follow-up to the question, if a petition is brought forward, it's vetted, that's accurate, meaning there's people that are on the petition sign from the village, reach a certain number, they come in and there's so many weeks, I understand. So we would go on the November ballot or
That's right.
does that change the tax rate when that comes in?
Well, no, it could if say that the petition, let's just say hypothetically, comes in sometime during the month of September, and this Board of Aldermen decides to set the lower tax rate back to the approved rate, which is either 3711 or 3612. There's an opportunity to be able to do it at that point. And if not, it stays at 48.6 cents until either the November or May election. Then based on the voter results will determine whether it stays at the 48.6 cents per $100 valuation or it reverts back and the city is then required to reimburse the taxpayers for that difference.
Okay, so it doesn't, the only, according to the document we have, says the only approved tax rate was really for last year, which is the 36.
Well, you have the voter approved tax rate at 3612.
4612, right?
What was that number you said?
Yeah, it says, 0.3612.
That is correct.
So, the petition is received early enough that it can be addressed in November, and it's like an and to the or, and the alderman, they come back and say instead of 48, they're going to move it out to 37. Is that what the voters would be voting on, or?
No, I really think it's going to go back to the 3612. I would have to look at the statute because the right now it could have gone to from the 3911 down to 3711, which is what based on the new property valuations would have generated the same amount of money.
Right.
But the voter approved rate is 3612.
So it was bought past the 36, which is just
Yes.
meaning it obviously will not fund anything close to the budget in approved.
That is correct. You the village would be at 50, a little over $500,000. So if it goes back, with the numbers I ran was at 4860, going down to 3711. It would have been like $423,000 cost. Definitely. So
that money has to come out of something.
yes, sir. So 70,000 of that would have been earmarked for either future debt issuance in the event the Board of Aldermen wanted to complete the 3 tech stop projects and the improvements at the wastewater treatment facility. So those 4 projects currently are paused. So if there is no 70,000, I mean, you start backing up to see where you land. So you're having to make that difference up. And all of the money that has been already spent on those projects will be paused and may be lost until it can be restarted, if it can be restarted.
So what I'm hearing is we're not in a good situation, no matter what.
I would describe it as horrible, but there is a path forward.
There is a path forward with what you propose, even if you cut it back. But if we go back to 36, whatever services we think we have today and we're not getting in this budget, will be even less, from what I can tell from the conversation.
It would be severely reduced.
So I think.
And I'll add to bringing that back down to that 36 cents. I think severely reduced is still a severe understatement as to what's going to happen if that's the case. And this is not, I've seen it, I've heard it. I'm trying not to hear it and ignore the white noise. But this is not fear mongering. We're not saying these things to try to scare anybody. I was elected because of my transparency. I'm just being transparent. I'm telling you the truth as to what's happening, and I also have an obligation to tell you what could happen if certain things don't happen. So I'm telling you, and I see the chatter too, and I hear the chatter. But we don't really have any services in the village other than police department. 8 months ago, I would say that's correct. But as soon as this gentleman came on board, he started moving in the direction to get us services other than PD. What happens inside these 4 walls in this building, most of the general population is not aware. You walk in here now, what it was before was this building is a former funeral home. And it felt like a funeral home when you walk in here. But when he's here, and we have a new board here as well, that feeling you get when you walk into this building is different than what it was in the past. These folks are buzzing around here. They're doing their job. He has empowered his staff to do what they needed to do. Contrary to what's out there in the news and social media, whatever, we've not elevated or inflated any sort of budget or payroll here in this building. We've actually decreased it. And they're doing everything they can. If you look at the rest of what's on the agenda tonight, all these ordinances, most of these are in place in order to move things forward, to keep things happening, keep it from happening again, what's happened in the past. That question was asked last week too about, well, how are there processes in place to prevent this happening again? My answer was yes. And the question was, well, how do we know that? Well, I guess you don't, other than there are ordinances on the agenda tonight that moves us in that direction. There are things that were created here in the village, situations that were created that should have been created by ordinance that were not. They were created by resolution or through meeting minutes, which hold no teeth, and you can't enforce them. Mr. Del Rosa, he's been doing this for 30 plus years. He comes in here and immediately off the top of his head says, we need to do this, 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 and this. And that's what we're doing. So it is true. 8 months ago, you only had one service here in the village. 2 if you were lucky enough to tie into the sewer. Unfortunately, a vast majority of our citizens are never going to be able to tie into that sewer, and that was probably by design. I didn't create that. We didn't create that. He didn't create that. It's been said in the previous administration they're going to try to pay down this sewer bond. You cannot do it when you're waiving $500,000 fees, sewer impact fees for developers that are coming in. I'm not doing that anymore. And he's not doing that anymore. We've had those conversations with developers, and it has been no across the board. And I promised that when I was running for mayor, and I'm here today, and I'm telling you, we're not doing it. They want to come in here and they want to build. They're going to pay us to come in here. They're going to pay to fix our roads. They're going to pay to increase our wastewater treatment plant. And we have developers on the phone that are wanting to do that. This idea of we cannot continue, we don't want growth, we don't want this, we don't want that. We are all about protecting the integrity of the historical value of Main Street and not touching it, leaving it the way that it is. We have missed the boat on commercial development on the west side over there. And if we do not bring in commercial development, we are in trouble. And we know that. QT came in here, everybody was up in arms about QT and their sign and all that. In the first 3 weeks, it was $11,000 in tax revenue. We need that sort of money here in order to fix these roads the way that we want to. I told you I was going to do it during my campaign and immediately started, Manny and I, having these conversations about fixing these potholes. We started. We've had to pause it now because now we realize we don't have the money to continue to do it. But that money's in there. Even just because you don't see it in here, the $200,000 for roads doesn't mean that we have no intentions of fixing the roads. We're going to do it differently. We're going to do it the right way. And if we need to issue debt in order to do that, that's what that $70,000 that's going into the interest sinking fund is for, is to pay for that sort of debt if we want to continue with the Royal Street project, which, by the way, if we don't do that, we've just spent $500,000 for nothing. That project needs to continue. Mill Creek Drive, that needs to continue. West Village Road, we got developments coming over there. That needs to be fixed, and that's a TxDOT project that's probably 3 to 5 years down the road, but it's coming. So all these things that are in here, I've only been here since 2012. I'm not native to Salado, but I have given every ounce of who I am to this community since I moved here. With the fire department first for 7 years, as an alderman for a year, and now I'm 90 days into my first term as mayor, or my first 2 years as mayor. I didn't want to do this. There are folks in this room that I have conversations with on the regular that are kind of my confidants, and they kind of keep me grounded. And they can attest that this was not an easy thing for me to have to stand up before anybody and have to say. I love Salado, and I love these people. And they've been great to my family, and I have given, as I said, every ounce that I have in me for this community. And this is not something that I wanted to do. You shouldn't have to be punished. And it's not a punishment. This is a temporary deal that this is not going to be, I heard it last week in the meeting about how long is this going to last. Forever. That's nonsense. I'm not a forever kind of guy. I may change my mind tomorrow, but we're going to do this a year, take a look at it again and see where we're at. Our projections for revenue streams coming in, they're conservative. And people are asking, well, how come you didn't, if you have all this development come in, why didn't you plan for higher? because we weren't taking sophisticated guesses at it, as was happening in the past. They were elevating their numbers as to what the revenue was going to come in and didn't hit that mark. These are very conservative numbers as to what we expect, and we think that we will beat those numbers, but he's basing it off of the historical data, not let's throw a dart at a dartboard and see where it hits, and we're going to stick with that number. So that's all I have to say about that. Is anybody else from the? I'm going to open this up. Are we already on public comments? I guess we are. Yeah. Come on up. Thank you.
Yes, I agree. Thank you very much, Mayor. I'm Christy Carlson, 264 Van Bibber. Lived here since 2006 with my husband, whose mom and grandfather grew up here. So I feel like I try to stay aware as well. So some of my questions are, I mean, the main point of this is to make up for our deficit. And what are our numbers? Like there's 900 households in the village proper that are trying to make up this deficit. But how many of those have their taxes frozen? So really, like, who is really paying the increased tax rate? And then, yes, like, what are we thinking? How long will that be? And is this really what we're thinking is our only recourse for the deficit? I mean, it sounds like this is what you're thinking.
Are you want me to answer that? Okay. Yeah, the answer is yes. This is our, at this point, this is our only recourse. Another point about the exemptions. $195,000 is what we know on the 65 and up population that we don't get. We take the $200,000 off of that, or $195,000. So that was tied into this, correct, Mr. De La Rosa?
That's correct.
Contrary to what was on Facebook today and yesterday, we did take those numbers into account. So it's something that we did look at. And their other question was how long? 2 years maximum. I'm thinking that's really our hope and that's our goal. This is not something that I want to see continue for long.
Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Let me add, Mayor, you mentioned that West Village Road was a tech dot. It's actually a federal appropriations from Congressman Carter's office. It's for $5.5 million. So look at that number. Most grant awards, and we've not been awarded the letter that it spells out all of the conditions of that award. But generally, this is how it works out. You're responsible for design and environmental out of pocket. And then you pay 20% of construction. Okay? 20% of 5 million, very basic, right? But it's 5.5. You're a little over $1 million that will be your portion. But again, now let me ask you, if you had to make improvements, where are you going to get all 5.5 million to be able to handle growth on the western side of I-35 if you have to do it on your own? Right? So part of this, when I do your budget and I'm trying to forecast, I'm looking at your development. It doesn't matter what you were proposed when things went in. Mayor and I sat with the developer. It's a 5 to 7 year before he's at 100% complete. So I'm not expecting anything on January 1st of 2025. I will expect some houses or some developments which have been completed, especially phase 1, to some percentage by January 1 of 2026. Same thing with Sanctuary, same thing with these other developments. We have more discussions that we need to have with other developments. So when I'm looking at these, you can have a discussion today. It is 2 or 3 years out. And that is reality for those that are in the development business or mortgage or brokerage. So, West Village Road is just like in points of Royal Street, Williams Road, and Mill Creek. When do we pay them? How do we issue the debts? Now, we did a lot of good. We had a lot of rain during the spring. We saw it on Chisholm Trail and Stagecoach Drive, those areas. It handled it. But you paid cash for those things. We got no debt. And then you made change orders for other improvements. You depleted it. So, Mayor, when somebody asks, well, how long is it going to take you to get out? Every 1 cent generates $38,097 currently. You don't have much of reserves now. So if you want, 6 months 4 months of reserves minimally. You gotta see how long it's gonna take you to get there. These developments and not allowing the market to drive development outside of the historic area, outside of Main Street, outside of the Mill Creek, it's going to be detrimental to your growth. So 2044, 2043, the western side of I-35, 2268, the south side needs to be allowed to have some growth. You incentivize commercial or mixed-use developments, but not residential. So I wanted to be very candid about what your long-term future is going to look like. Most times, I just came from 7.5 years in one of the most disadvantaged counties and cities in the United States. And if you look at my background, my first 20 years, I didn't do anything but affluent communities. Inner city Houston, the Woodlands. And in the last 15 years, I helped communities like this. I took a position down in South Texas while I was living in Williamson County for 7 years because they were a community with a 37% poverty level. In 2016, they were at 32% in 2023 when I left. But their finances went from $3 million in 2016 when I started, and that was all of their money together, to unassigned reserves of over $14 million when I left. They were able to leverage those funds with grants, with the Cameron County Road Mobility Authority, with the Rio Grande Valley Metropolitan Planning Organization, which is the federal fund. We created the 5th largest MPO during my tenure there, and again, it was created because I was very stubborn, and I had a mayor and city commissioners that followed that advice. We were going to get a seat at that table. Mayor, you just got elected for the first time to the Killing Temple, the Killing Temple MPO. We now have representation on that technical advisory board. So you're getting much more involved in these organizations. But you know, when I said I didn't want to discuss it, it's your decision. If it doesn't go through, again, I caution everybody on how they vote. Because in 2012, I was at Jonestown when we had to reduce staff. It did take me, I was there for 22 months. It took me an entire cycle, one fiscal year, to get them back on their path forward. I helped set up Liberty Hill in 2011. If you start to see the picture, this is all I do. I'm very candid. I smile a lot. I've already pulled my hair out. It's missing on the back of my head. So I'm not gonna, I can't do much more for you than give you advice. Give the citizens advice, have a no open door policy, but I'm not a budget person. I'm a finance. I will set your strategy out for the next 5, 10, 15, 30 years out. I need where you need to land. And it is based on your input. It is based on what I think it needs. Because if I don't get some input from you or the constituents, I don't know what you want. But once I understand that business model that you're looking for, Liberty Hill is a perfect example. We incorporated into the water and sewer side of our business there 6 months, everything along that's known as Sarita, along Highway 29 and Ronald Reagan, they're all serviced by Liberty Hill. They were serviced because we were looking to provide water and sewer services to the residential areas, but never bring them into the city limits. We concentrated on business along 29 and the other county roads, along 183. That business model was long established, and it continues to be the same. What your business model is, it's me listening to you and then incorporating those. Your ordinances need some clarity with what we're doing. Your rules were long established. They just weren't being followed every letter of both ordinances, and we're looking to do that. So again, to each one of you, they may be a conservative. The revenue streams may be conservative, and I've heard a couple of comments that say, I see your strategy. If we get more revenue, we will be pleasantly surprised and your reserves will build up much faster. But why overestimate a revenue stream if historically I can't see it? And your expenses weren't truly noticed. And then you've been moving general fund funding over to the wastewater. And again, given enough time, a couple of more months, I can propose something that'll meet the statutory requirements to make those adjustments. And you may need to revisit that with an increase to the users that are actually getting that service. Again, it'll be your decision. I've taken up too much of your time here.
Thank you.
Aside from the $500,000 for Royal Street, just for the design and construction part of that, when the question was asked about our officer who's investigating this matter to find out really what happened, whether he was an accountant or not. I'm not either, but I know how to use a calculator, and I understand that if I take money out of this bucket and keep dwindling it down and I'll replenish it over here, it's going to keep going down, down, down. You're not putting any more money into it, and that's what was happening. We're paying cash for everything that was going. There was no debt issued, and we were paying the bills for developers. We're paying attorney fees. We're paying engineering fees. We're paying for professional inspectors and that sort of thing, and we're never charging it back to the developer. We are now. Ms. Pence, where you at? How much have we charged back just over the past 60 days?
Yeah, Chief.
Well, 300,000 that I know of. How about just give me a rough estimate?
Yeah, and some of the developers are taking us to task for having to go through all the details. And let me tell you why we're having difficulty. Because the engineer, the firm, would just put it in a lump sum, which tells me that it was never intended to go after. Now we're having to go back, pull the details, explain why we're collecting these. We've requested from those professional consultants on how every project is its own. If not, I get an email. What do you want me to charge this to? General services, which means it's us. For example, a utility you locate. Encore, they're going to put, and they want to know if they're anywhere near our wastewater. I can't charge it to anybody. You're going to incur a cost. But if it's a very specific project, they want to know. And we met with some of the local, like the Grace Landing. We don't believe these are accurate. Can you give us details? And we have a duty to provide those details, right? So tonight, you did an escrow agreement last time. You do one again. There's one before this evening. We're trying to collect those funds up front. If we know that it's going to cost us several $1,000s, why are we fronting it and then having to go to collect? So we're not going, yeah, it's going to cost X amount. This is our estimated cost. Put up the escrow funds. When it's closed out and we've met all of your obligations and ours, we refund you and close it out. We will have a tracking mechanism in the future, and I'm working. You had policies for procurement. They were adopted by policy. You got to find them. They were in a cabinet, in a shelf, in a desk drawer. It is my position that these policies should be adopted by ordinance. And any city manager in the future or any employee that violates those ordinances are subject to disciplinary action. But yeah, and I can't tell much because we're not tracking it that way. We're just happy that they're responding, and some of it is being challenged, some of it they're going to be sending payments. But
one of them was $300,000 though.
Pardon me?
One of them was in excess of $300,000.
Oh yes. Okay.
So that's just for one developer. My point was, we're going after the money that's owed us. All right. Anything? You good? All right. If there's nothing else on that, we'll move on to item 3. Public hearing. Hold a public hearing regarding the proposed ad valorem tax rate for the 2024 tax year to help fund the proposed fiscal year 2025 operating budget for the Village of Salado. The time is 7:19, and we are now entering into a public hearing. So I will open it up. Anybody who wants to get up and speak about this? Come on up, Mr. Kennedy. I'm sorry, Kennedy.
Well, hello everyone. I'm James Kennedy. My wife Jill and I live at 819 Indian Trail. we're rude if we leave after I'm done here, but I do have to leave after getting that time. You know, I don't know anybody in this room. I don't, you know, we moved into the town in March. We've been trying to become Salado residents for about 5 years. And when real estate was white hot, man, they offered on a couple of houses, couldn't make it happen. And then here this last year, we stumbled into the place we want to call our retirement home. I'm still working. I've been in commercial construction for about 49.5 years so far, so I'm not unfamiliar with some of the things you're talking about here. Planning to retire this next year. And so I think that, you know, what we know about what the predicament is, and we don't envy you folks for having to deal with what you have to deal with. It sounds like we're in trouble. Really, the extent of what we know and what I thought I was going to hear mostly was we're somewhere between $1 and $2 million in debt, depending on who put deposit realty money into the general fund. What we know is what we've read in the local paper and your podcast or video that when you said we were in trouble. My thoughts really go to, you know, if we have a problem, are we trying to fix this problem in 1 or 2 years' time by raising tax rates on folks that are on fixed incomes, like I'm going to be here shortly? At probably the worst time in your lifetime in terms of inflation, in terms of what it costs you at the grocery store, what your homeowners and car insurance bills look like, utility bills, all the rest of that. Is it really necessary? I heard you say quietly a moment ago that we have to do this because we don't have a choice. I would think you do have choices. And what I heard you say, whoever you are, and what I heard you say about developers needing to pay their fair share. And, you know, I come in as a contractor and I build the stores or the offices or the hospitals or what have you. All this development crap is already done. But I do know enough to know that the cities, while some may throw money at the Elon Musks of the world, we're building for that guy, to incentivize them. Generally speaking, across the country, across everywhere, you know, the folks that want to come in and develop a commercial realty property or residential or what have you, they pay their way. They pay for your rates. They pay the things this gentleman over here is talking about that they should be paying. And I feel badly for you that you have to clean up a mess that was created before you if that hadn't been being done. But I have to believe that if you maybe rather than vote now to increase the tax rate on the folks that could very well be taxed out of their home, as the solution, maybe you ought to spend a little more time now considering the options of this professional consultant is offering. Forecast the developments that are on the other side of the highway and what those dollars could be and what they could bring. Take advantage of what Salado is with the revenue that can be brought in with the kind of stuff that brings tourism in. You know, holiday time, we come here all the time. I don't know how many dollars y'all make, you know, doing that, but factor all of those positive income streams into the equation. And don't be too hasty to raise taxes on the poor individuals that just want to live here and retire here, and those especially who are on fixed income. I mean, this is a tough pill to swallow when we moved in, you know, in March, and we hear this, you know, doom and gloom forecast about budget. You know, it didn't make me feel real good about the decision I made to buy in here. And I got to believe that there are more positive options that are available to you by maybe taking a little more time to work your way through this whole thing than to hastily raise the tax to the 48 point whatever percent that we're talking about. And as optimistic as you are about it's only for a year or two, it never works that way. He's let you know that the money that somebody's dropping on the table today, you're not going to see it for 3, 4, 5 years. On a new development that comes over here, you're not going to recognize that in 2 years. So as much as it sounds great that this is a temporary 1 year, 2 year something, it's not going to be that. There's never been a city ever that's taken a rate, increased it, and then reduced it again 1 year, 2 years, 5 years later. It just doesn't happen. It never happens. And you may be the most genuine, transparent person in town, but if you get hit by a bus, you know, you're gone. And trust me, you'll be overwhelmed by the circumstances. You won't be able to stand up with what you just said. You just won't. So if you really think it's a 1-2 year thing, then maybe it's a supplemental tax bill this year for us. Maybe it's a supplemental tax bill next year or something. But if you make a permanent increase in the taxes today, it will stay there. And the folks that can't afford to pay them will be forced out of their homes or have to figure something else out, because that's just the way it is. I really think you should put a pause on the idea of increasing taxes, look at the other income revenue streams that are not just possible, but going to happen on the other side of the freeway, put that into the equation, maybe borrow some money in the meantime to cover the debt, cover the needs that we have right now. And look at a bigger picture, a little more optimistic picture, other than taxing the people that live here. And that's about all I've got to say. So, thanks for your time, and sorry, but I really do squash that. Come to your next.
Thank you. Is it appropriate for me to respond to that? Yeah. This was not a hasty decision. I can assure you of that. Number two, to say that tax increases take effect and then never come back down, that's just not a true statement. We can go back historically and look. We were at 65 cents at one point. Is that correct? 62.5. And over the course of 5 years brought it down to where it's at now. So that's just not, maybe historically in other places, but that's not the case here.
Linda Reynolds, 1110 Mill Creek Drive. Unlike Mr. Canopy, I came in 2011. I hit just the right time. My taxes are frozen. The city of Salado, the village of Salado, has done given a great gift to those of us who've hit 65 and over. And the state gives us homestead. My mother got taxed out of her house on Lake Michigan. She had to rent it to pay taxes, and finally she sold it. I have just paid a $4,000 tax bill in Maine at a cabin that they don't give me any breaks in Maine. They're starting to talk about it at the federal level, or the government level. But here in Salado, I have been given this frozen tax thing. My problem is, of course, eventually we're going to be paying huge bills for schools. But I appreciate the fact that we are not taxing people out of their houses in Salado. I don't think that's happening. And I do believe, I trust you guys to consider every year, as you have considered this year, taking your time. There is a certain number of houses that are off the tax roll. I think I saw on the Bell County 245 houses. They may be off the tax rolls because of senior citizens. They may be off the tax rolls for military. They may be off the tax rolls for religious or school purposes. So there are some houses, some places. I appreciate how hard you've worked, and I'm willing, I know I'm frozen, so I'm not going to be paying the increase that much other than valuation, but I appreciate how hard you've worked, that you've come to this. I do suggest one thing. Many people have talked in all of the other meetings you've had and listened to people. They said, how can we make sure this doesn't happen again? That $900 and whatever $1,000 that should have gone in escrow going into a bank account, a general fund. I do believe, and it might be a great job for the Mayor Pro Tem, at every meeting, somebody from the offices gives him a listing of all deposits. Because like Alderman Graham said, who'd have thought that we had to follow deposits in the bank account to keep track of things that they went into? There's probably not a person in this room, unless they have enough money to pay for their own houses cash, who doesn't understand escrow. How our former village manager could take all that money and not put it in escrow for the developer's use or payments, but to use it on the Mill Creek $100 and some thousand underground thing that never needed to be done, or the lovely paving of Center Circle, which needed to be done, but it wasn't a massively important thing to get done. We were spending money we didn't have, and I resent that a great deal from the former administration. I've been very careful in my budget. I don't owe anybody anything, and I've lived that way for a long time as a widow raising a daughter going to college. So I appreciate how hard you all have worked. I really do. Thank you.
I would disagree about one thing. Jim Boynton.
Hey,
Okay.
I'll take care of that. Go ahead, Mr. Moore, your name and address,
No, I
please.
need all the supervision I can get. I'm a dummy.
I understand,
Since
but
I don't
this
live in
is.
Mill Creek,
okay.
I'm probably pretty dumb. I want to point out,
Give us your name and address.
Jim Boynton, 3565 FM 2843 Salado.
Thank you.
As I pointed out all along, it was pointed out what corruption was going on for the last 2 or 3 years. You were on the council when I called for the city manager's job. We couldn't even get it to a vote. We're paying for what was not done during that time. I understand this young lady back here, her taxes are not frozen. I own property. Even if you're older, just so everybody understands it, even if you're older, if you own taxes in this town, but it's not your homestead, you pay full price. So just because somebody's older that owns something, like Darlene owns lots of stuff, she pays full price except for her homestead. Everybody knew it was coming. The biggest joke around town was how long they could hold up Domino's. They held it up till the sign fell down about it was coming. They did. The sign fell down on the property before they ever broke ground. The whole community is guilty of this, and I can't make everybody say it enough. These guys are not guilty. When people would come forward and tell y'all how they're cheating us, think about the houses that were held up that we had. They were held up 18 months, no tax. Then I got to pay tax on that C of O I showed you for everybody, even though we couldn't live in the house. I paid tax on it, all of it, a lot of it. This has been a corrupt system for years. That box that's full of stuff is documentation that came out of the city records. We could go back and start pursuing some of that. We have, one of the things I have is a falsified building permit by one of the former city mayors with a picture of him over there working on this add-on on a restaurant. I've got documentation of that. Nobody wants to see it. That's why that I think we ought to look at what our problem really is. I have kids over there just about the age of this young lady that spoke. Their taxes are going to go up. Their idea is, let's just pay it and move on because Bert and them will finally dig us out. The city manager is probably the smartest cat we've had in this town in years. If we don't listen to him and we keep going the same way we were, where we could do this or we could do that, we're going to flounder still. We should have, that sewer was kept from us, and y'all all know it. They didn't run it up Bain Street because they didn't want people looking onto it. The former mayor told me that was to keep people from hooking on so they could save volume for the sanctuary. He said that a multitude of times. Everybody ignores that. So we have a council member right here on the council that went to them with a proposal to hook on and was denied. So we've cooked our own goose to a degree, and now we're all pulling our hair out. It's a community-wide effort at looking the other way when the corruption went on.
Thank you.
Brian Sunshine, 926 Northwoods Road, Salado. I've lived here since '97 when we had no property tax. Some of us still don't have property tax. People sitting on the dais right now. My taxes are being voted upon by people who are paying zero property taxes. Check the tax roll. Delta, 2023. Alderman Graham, you paid zero. Alderman Hurst, you paid zero. Alderman McDonald, you paid zero. Mayor Henry, you paid zero because I think you rent.
I still pay.
You still pay?
Yeah.
Okay. Mayor Pro Tem Bell is the only one who pays full freight. And he's the only one who voted against the mayor's proposed budget. Like I said, I've lived here for a long time. I've seen my taxes go up and up and up and up. When Salado was incorporated, we were going to be self-sustaining. On sales tax alone, through the art fair, which is now dead, killed it. This notion of 62.5 cents. Well, when the taxes were 62.5 cents, my house was worth like $240,000. Now I'm at like $500,000. So, these rates, by themselves in a vacuum, it looks good that we've lowered the rate. Everybody's appraisal has gone up. So let's be honest about it. We're paying more in taxes every single year, and we'll continue to. We're at 48.6 cents right now. Are we going to be at the voter-approved rate next year? Well, if we are, taxes will go up another 3.5% because that's the cap. So let's be honest about taxes. I want to touch on an issue about this misappropriation of payments. I don't know if anybody's looked on the village website, but I tried to find the 2023 financials in the February 16th meeting agenda packet. You know what? They're not there. They're not there. I was 3 different times over the last 48 hours just to make sure. They're not present, but they're on the agenda. You know where they're at on the agenda? They're on the consent agenda. That means nobody looks at them, they approve them like the minutes, and there is accountability from everyone who's on that board at that time. From Jason, from Rodney, from Bert, nobody looks at the financials. So, number one, take the financials off of the consent agenda. Look at them and make them an agenda item worthy of discussing, because y'all dropped the ball. On December 21st, 2022, there was no deposit into escrow. Of course, the January financials are missing. The February financials show an increase of about $1 million into the operating fund under Horizon Bank. And under liabilities, $945,000, $625.08 escrow under subdivision, line item 2301. They're here. Why doesn't anybody ask any questions? Are we afraid to? Tim Fleischer last week had some excellent suggestions. So I went to the town hall roughly almost a month ago, and I appreciate the transparency and disclosure to an extent until I realized, well, we were at 48.6 cents there then. Lots of people have had lots of ideas, lots of good ideas about how to cut spending. And we're still at 48.6%, 48.6 cents on every $100 valuation. The needle hasn't moved a bit. So what's the point in speaking out at all? Because it is what it is, and it will be what it's going to be, and taxes are going to go up over and over and over again. Where's the $50,000 or whatever it costs to do a forensic audit in the budget? I mean, somebody clearly screwed up, and we're not willing to invest in figuring out what happened. I can do my own forensic audit just by looking at the minutes and the financials. And then, finally, I don't understand this whole disbanding of committees. This will come up later, this disbanding of committees.
We're not going to talk about that.
Okay.
We're talking about
all right. Well, if there's a financial impact, I would like to us invest in citizen participation. I think that's all I have. Nope, that's not all I have. 3% of the voters are required for a petition to go back to the voter-approved tax rate. I had to step out, Mr. McDonald, when you were speaking, based on the current tax roll of 2,118 voters. That's only 64 signatures. Now I'm going to get them. And I'm not saying 48 cents is right, but I'm paying for it. I'm paying for all these people that are doing. I'm paying for the people that are making the decision. And it's not right. I've got 3 children in college. It's going to cost me $70,000 this year. Who's helping me with that? Nobody. I'm doing it myself because it's the right thing to do. Now I have to pay more taxes. And I don't want to. I want it to grow gradually. And I don't want to solve everybody's problems all at once. Thank you. And yes, I'm mad.
Who's next?
Tim Fleischer, 912 Cedar Park Circle. And I did a quick thing on Belcast about Alderman Zach Hurst, about Alderman Michael McDonald. It's true, you did not pay property taxes. You are disabled veterans. Thank you for your service. And Brian, you and I agree on lots of things, but how dare you not tell the truth about these two? I don't know, Jason, whether you are a disabled veteran or not.
I'm in the same thing.
Okay, I didn't find it as quickly as I did these two. So thank all three of you. As the son of a Vietnam veteran, how dare anyone drag you through the mud like that? How dare anyone drag you through the mud? That's all I have to say.
Thank you. Who's next? Nope, nobody? Alderman Graham, you have anything?
No, I'm good, thank you.
Alderman Hurst? Nothing. Mr. McDonald?
No, Mayor.
Mayor Pro Tem Bell? All right, it is 7:41 and we are leaving the public hearing. Item 4A, discuss and possible action to approve ordinance number 2024-13, an ordinance of the Village of Salado adopting the fiscal year 2024-25 annual operating budget for the Village of Salado, Texas, declaring findings of fact, providing an effective date, providing severability clause, and providing an open meeting clause. Mr. De La Rosa.
Mayor and Alderman, it is my recommendation that the ordinance be adopted as presented.
Thank you, sir. Alderman Graham, you have any questions?
I have no questions.
Alderman Hurst? No questions. Alderman McDonald?
No, Mayor, thank you.
Mayor Pro Tem Bell? I'll open it up to public comments. None? Okay. Then I will entertain a motion.
Make a motion that we adopt an ordinance of the Village of Salado, which will adopt the fiscal year 2024-25 annual operating budget for the Village of Salado, declaring findings of fact, providing an effective date, and providing severability clause, and providing an open meetings clause as written and presented.
Motion made by Alderman Graham to approve as written. Second. Seconded by Alderman Hurst. Any further discussion?
We have questions for me? Or we have discussion? I'm sorry to do that.
Nothing. Alderman Graham, you got questions for Mr. De La Rosa?
No questions.
Alderman Hurst? No. Alderman McDonald?
No, Mayor, thank you.
Just real quick, Manny, on the wastewater deficit, how long do you think it'll take to turn that around? Are we going to be able to do that within this budget cycle and amend this budget some point down the road in this budget cycle to offset that I think it's $65,000?
Yes, sir, that is my intent. You cannot do a rate change without meeting the statutory requirements, but it is my intent with the board's authorization to proceed as soon as we get this behind us during the fall, and before the end of the year, you will have a new tax rate, a new sewer rate that has been approved and adopted, and then you will set when to implement that. But I would like for it to go sometime in the second quarter of the next fiscal year.
Okay. Motion was made by Alderman Graham and seconded by Alderman Hurst. Any further discussion? Question has been called, and I'm going to go down the line on this. Alderman Graham?
Yes.
Alderman Hurst?
Yes.
Alderman McDonald,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Bell.
Yes.
Ms. Bean, that passes 4-0. Item B, discuss some possible action to approve ordinance number 2024-14, an ordinance of the Village of Salado, Texas, setting a property tax ad valorem tax rate, approving the ad valorem tax rate and levy of 48.6 cents per $100 of assessed valuation of all taxable property within the corporate limits of the villages for the 2024 tax year to fund the fiscal year 2024-25 operating budget for the Village of Salado, providing for an exemption on residence homesteads, providing for exemptions for individuals who are disabled or 65 years of age or older, providing for penalties and interest, providing for severability, providing for repealing conflict, providing for proper notice and meetings, providing for engrossment and enrollment, providing for notification to assessor, and providing for publication and effective date. Mr. De La Rosa.
Mayor and Alderman, it is my recommendation that this ordinance be adopted as presented.
Thank you. I'll open this up for public comments now. Chatty.
So this is what I originally wanted to talk about on the tax rate.
Give us your name and address again,
912 Cedar Park Circle.
Thank you.
We currently have the highest exemptions allowed for homestead at $50,000. Whether you are 65 or older, or anyone who files a homestead, you get to write off $50,000 of your taxable property. When you turn 65, you get to get a 20% write-off of your property value. So if you live in a $500,000 home, it's $100,000 taken off of your property value, and then your taxes are frozen. If you look at what's on BellCAD, under the property tax information, ours are the most generous allowed by the state. When we first adopted the tax rate, it was adopted at 5 cents, and the people that adopted that tax rate also adopted the most generous exemptions possible. And every year I've come before the board as a taxpayer and said that this is not the best way to do business. There are certain years that you can address those exemptions. And I think our city manager probably knows more those years that you can do that. So whenever those years come up, you need to address those exemptions and get them more in line to what the rest of the market has. It won't affect those who have already filed their exemptions. It won't affect those who are already frozen. It will only affect new properties, new buyers, and it will help to unhamstring you guys. Our village has been hamstrung from the first time that we ever adopted a tax rate. And we've been fighting an uphill battle ever since. If you look at the M&O portion of the tax rate, and you compare to what other cities are doing, we're not keeping up. Our M&O, even with the tax increase, is not adequate to fund the city in the way that we want. If there is a tax election, it will probably be in May, because the deadline, I think, for filing a petition is August 19th to meet the November deadline, unless the district court intervenes somehow. If we have an election in May that rolls back our tax rate to 36, the devastation to this budget, more than halfway through a year, you're going to be October, November, December, you're going to be 8 months into your fiscal year. And if in 8 months into your fiscal year, people cut you off at the knees, regardless of how you feel about the budget, we're going to end up with a bankruptcy. The escrow that we owe developers is almost $1 million. You adopted a budget that does not address that. You have the ability to amend your budget. I hope that after you adopt the tax rate to fund this budget, that you will look seriously at the suggestions I made of freezing administration, development services, and police at the current year's budget, moving the $300,000 that the sewer bond paid to sewer operations and then paid to the general operation, earmarking those funds to repay the escrow. Because right now you don't have the money and you don't know when it's going to come due. It's not your fault. When you received that $900,000+, you should have been informed by your city administrator that you needed to encumber those funds. That would have been the most forthright thing to do. Now, in your legal accounting, it's in there way down the page under your liabilities, but you were never told as a board one time. You were never fully informed. Your decisions by Alderman Graham and Alderman Bell, and for 1 year Alderman Henry, were made with the advice you were given. It wasn't full advice. Alderman McDonald and Alderman Hurst, I'm sorry you got elected because because you're both friends of mine, and oh my God, you inherited a mess. And Manny, you have inherited a mess, and you are doing the absolute best that you can. And your reports in the last Alderman meeting were far more forthright. But you've got a debt hanging over your head, and that debt can bankrupt you. And I hope you'll make changes in the future to the budget to address that debt so that it doesn't bankrupt our city. And I hope that the voters will realize that if we cut your throats, we're cutting our own.
Thank you. Anybody else? Okay. Alderman Graham, do you have any questions?
I don't.
Rosa? Alderman Hurst? Alderman McDonald?
No, Mayor, thank you.
Mayor Pro Tem Bell?
Manny, if I recall right, you said 1 cent of tax values a $30,000 revenue. Is that about the
$38,097.
okay? So if we weren't at 48, let's say we were at 44. Let's say we took 4 cents out of it. That equates to $120,000 approximately. 130. So
4 cents, yeah, that's 160,000.
So would there be room in this budget to eliminate $160,000 of either expenses or increase the revenue slightly to offset that? I like the idea of the conservative revenue. We did it in the school district all the time. That's how we built things out too. We underestimated the revenue and then came out on top when we put more butts in the seats. So, but would that be something that might be achievable?
Yeah, I think if you did something like this, and I know that the mayor and I had a discussion about finishing out these projects, and not because I want to see the projects completed, it's because I don't want you to lose what you have. If you would have issued certificates of obligation or general obligation bonds, you would have been able to reimburse yourself for any of the projects. I think I can still do that. In other words, and I heard earlier in Mr. Fleischman, we have to take care of some of our obligations, which means that if you issue debt say it's a 15-year bond, you can probably reimburse some of the stuff that you already spent on the tech top projects. To the extent that in, say, for the first 3 years, you don't pay anything but interest, which is what I set aside, the 70,000, because the note, you're paying the wastewater, and historically, I'm used to about $120,000 once a year or twice a year payment. Yeah. But if you issue debt to cover and reimburse yourself, you'll actually be in a slightly better position, and you could actually maybe able to lower it down by 4 cents and still be able to maintain the staffing. Look, there's not a lot of staff in this building. What you're going to be affecting is public safety for me. And I've had this conversation with the mayor. I said, I'm the guy that costs you the most. I said, and I'm prepared to exit because that'll at least save you quite a bit. Okay? But, having said that, you are in a stagnant position for years to come. Right? So, Mayor, the answer is yes. I believe you can, but that would be issuing debt to cover some of your losses so you can replenish your budget, and that would be a budget amendment in the future. But what you cannot do, and again, it's not to criticize, but you cannot adopt a budget at 48.6 cents and not go back and do a modification to that budget. It would be a deficit for a short period of time while I address the financing. Again, this is off the cuff, not me really, but it's not anything that I haven't done in the past. But generally, I'm not doing it post-tax, I'm doing it pre. But I think it's doable. That you're to remove some things, there's $70,000, which is about the only flux you've got in there in this budget. It's not a quick fix, right? If we're talking about the $945,000, if you wanted to collect it all in 1 year, I ran the numbers today. It's like a 24.9% increase, just that alone in 1 year. Now, I've got other ways I think we're going to be able to manage it. That's why, while it's a police matter, I will not release the development or any more than what it is in our records. But I am trying to come up with a solution where I will be able to work this out with the developer, because it's got history. I know who this developer is. I know what he's been doing for the last 4 years. So I think that I can reach that through a settlement, at least with some long-term projects. But if we owe it, and that's yet to be determined, we think we owe it because of the notation. But more directly, Mayor Pro Tem, a question off the dice, off the cuff, tells me that I think I can do it because you're going to have to issue debt somewhere along the way, and that will buy us the latitude that we need. But if you're going to issue debt and you get a petition, and the questions earlier was, is it bad? Yes, it's a path forward. But if you go into bankruptcy, as Mr. Fleischer indicated, and that is a possibility, that means a state district court will assign a court master. You will go into receivership, and at that point, the court will determine how it meets its obligations. You'll be alderman with no authority. And that has happened around the state, the cities. They go either come close to bankruptcy, but more happens when they can't run their utilities and the state steps in. And governing bodies lose all of their authority, and that can happen 10, 15 years. So bankruptcy, if that's the direction you end up in, it is much worse than you could ever fathom you'd be in. Because the city really cannot go insolvent. It has contractual obligations, it's got PIDs, it has contractual obligations that it's had for a long time. The city will exist, it just will not be under your direct authority. And this just doesn't happen in Texas, it happens all across the United States.
Thank you. No, Mr. Mayor, Manny, last time we met, you talked about how much of an increase this was going to make for every $100,000 of a house. Do you remember that?
Yes, sir, I have my notes here.
If you could walk us through those numbers again, not ad nauseum, but, you know, how many dollars will, if approved, if this tax is approved, if this ad valorem tax rate is approved, how much of an increase is that going to be in an individual's property tax per month?
Okay, and what I did is I took the medium home in Salado, which is $428,000. You have homes going in Eagle Heights for roughly $600,000. You have them going in Sanctuary for over $900,000. Not all homes fall in this category. Okay, but a medium home at $428,000 is a $32.56 a month increase.
So we're talking, all this discussion is about $32 extra dollars a month on a median house.
That is correct.
And so if it was, I think what we did some math and said it was like basically a $7 increase per every $100,000.
$7.61.
$7.61. So if you have $1 million house, you're going to be paying $70 increase in property taxes for a year, maybe two. Per month. So 12 times 70.
Yes, sir.
All right. I just want to make sure that we're all really aware of the dollar amount that we're talking about here. I mean, every penny counts. I get it, but I don't want to misrepresent this increase to be more than it is or less than it is. So thanks for answering those questions, man. Appreciate it.
Anybody else? Okay. If there are no further questions, then I will open the floor for a motion.
I'll make a motion that we approve the tax rate and levy of 0.4860 per $100 of assessed valuation as presented.
Motion made by Alderman Graham to approve as presented. Seconded by Alderman Hurst. Any further discussion on this?
Question.
Question been called by Alderman McDonald. Again, I'll go down the line. Alderman Graham.
Yes.
Alderman Hurst.
Yes.
Alderman McDonald.
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Bell.
Yes.
That passes, Ms. Bean, 4-0. Next item is C, discuss some possible action to approve an escrow agreement by and between the Village of Salado, Texas and Campbell Branch Investments, LLC, referred to as the Dorothy 3 and the Dorothy 4 developments, and authorize the village administrator to execute the agreement. Mr. De La Rosa.
Okay, Mayor and Alderman, what you have is an escrow agreement for, let's see here, it's not very much. For $3,000. Let me tell you what this is. This is two plats, Dorothy 3 and 4. These are small rectangular plats that lie on the western side of Williams, just on the southern side of the new proposed high school, or the new high school site. When a plat is approved, when it goes through a platting process, statutorily it needs to be approved in a short period of window if it doesn't have any errors. So sometimes if you're using professional consultants, it takes you longer to get the bill from your consultants on what is owed for either plat review or engineering before the plat needs to be approved. So we go through a plat approval process, we meet it statutorily, but then it will sit in my office, not signed by either the mayor or myself once it's been approved. And a minor plat doesn't come back before the governing body. It's done administratively since there is no roadway, no water lines, no sewer lines, no public infrastructure. Okay? So that means that it sits and brokers or sellers or buyers want to transact on this property. So it can either sit there until we get the funds that are owed to us, because you know how difficult it is to collect from somebody that owes you once you signed off on a plat? Nearly impossible. You'd have to go through courts. The only leverage you have is to hold on to the plat. This allows, and your escrow agreement was already allowed by ordinance. What we did was cleaned up the form process, and then we'll discuss the authorization on the next ordinance. So this 3,000, you'll see that we've already wrote a receipt, and you'll see the letters from MRB that says, hey, it's already met all the requirements. So it's been signed, it's been handed over for plat. So, but again, I wanted to give you the mechanics of how fast we move and what it is. This is a relatively small project, but some will have roadways, some will have much more. That's why we start off with a base of about 30,000. And depending how much legal or engineering or other sorts, including administrative fees that we may need, just because it's even handled by folks here, by myself, by the planner. So we need to recoup those. So it is my recommendation that this escrow agreement, which has already been met, be approved.
Thank you, sir. Alderman Graham, you have any questions?
No questions, thank you.
Alderman Hurst? No questions. Alderman McDonald?
Yes, real quick, Mr. De La Rosa, from the moment they presented this to you to today, what was the turnaround time to get this going based on the efficiency? Just generality.
What do you mean, too? How fast we got the plat completed?
Yeah, and all that. In other words, I know it's a small piece here, but just so I understand how long it takes for us to get it done as far as the village is concerned. Time invested and such.
Yeah, generally, because it didn't take us 3 weeks.
That's good.
It's quick, yes, sir.
Better than what it used to be. Thank you for answering my question, Mr. De La Rosa.
Mayor Pro Tem Bell?
So we received a check for 3,000,
Yes, sir.
correct? I'm gonna ask a really stupid question. Did we place that in a reserve account?
We did.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
Oh, God. All right, any public comments on this? No? All right, I will open the floor for a motion, please.
Move to approve as presented.
Motion made by Mayor Pro Tem Bell to approve as presented.
Second.
Second by Alderman McDonald. Any further discussion? Question called by Alderman Hurst. All in favor of approval as written, say yes.
Yes.
Any opposed? This being, it passes 4-0. Next item D, discuss some possible action to approve ordinance number 2024-15, an ordinance of the Village of Salado, Texas, authorizing the village administrator to enter into escrow agreement to reimburse the village for engineering, legal, consulting, and administrative fees, and providing findings of fact, effective date, repealer, severability clause, and proper notice of meeting. Mr. De La Rosa, is this not a procedure to put in place to stop this from happening again?
This is yes, sir. It is a procedure to make sure that it is tracked. It will also be implemented into a future policy and how deposits will be handled.
Okay, thank you. Anything else you want to add to that?
No, sir. And the reason that I wanted to present this ordinance was so that we wouldn't have these things sitting around. We have set up a tracking mechanism, but it is contractually, I'm allowed to sign agreements with your consent. This just authorizes that consent for this one act.
Okay, thank you. Alderman Graham, any questions?
No, just one comment. Thank you.
Yes.
Alderman Hurst.
No question.
Alderman McDonald.
No, Mayor.
Mayor Pro Tem Bell. All right, any public comments on this item? All right, I'll open the floor for motion.
Move to approve ordinance 2024-15.
Motion made by Mayor Pro Tem Bell to approve as written.
Second.
Seconded by Alderman McDonald. Any further discussion?
Question.
Question called by Alderman Graham. All in favor of approval as written, say yes.
Yes.
Any opposed? Being that passes 4-0. Item E, discuss some possible action to approve ordinance number 2024-16, an ordinance of the Village of Salado, Texas, dissolving the Parks Advisory Board, Tourism Advisory Board, Economic Development Advisory Board, and the Music Friendly Community Advisory Board, and providing findings of fact, effective date, repealer, severability clause, and proper notice of meeting. I'll kick this one off. Mr. De La Rosa?
If you don't mind, can I start first?
Yeah, go ahead.
Because I wanted to give you some background.
Yeah.
Mayor and Alderman, this proposed ordinance does not repeal ordinance number 2022-07. 2022-07 in the whereas, and this is why it came up. Whereas the composition, authority, functions, and responsibilities of these boards, committees, and commissions shall be set forth by the village by ordinance or resolution. In other words, this creates the boards, but the boards that were actually created or are to be created never established by ordinance or resolution as to what the function would be, what the bylaws would be, any operating. So therefore, because what I'm hearing is sometimes, well, we're just doing away with boards. No, they were always meant to be ad hoc. It was what I was told when I first came on board. It's what was believed to be some of it. So until we have more time to establish those functionalities of each board with bylaws. Now, also let me provide the Salado Cultural Arts District, the SCAT group, was actually created in the summer of 2016. In February of 2016, Kim Faust, at the time, provided letter of support. There might have been one from the mayor. There was one from a county judge. You provided support for the creation of the Salado Cultural Arts District, but it was never a city board. It has a 10-year resolution. They submitted their own application to the state of Texas. I have a copy of the entire application, and I've had a conversation with Bill Shipman about this. It was never yours. If your cultural arts district would have been created, you would have incorporated by ordinance, put it in your comprehensive plan and into other ordinances, just like your zoning. Second is the museum friendly group was an MOU that the Board of Aldermen entered into with the state of Texas. It had certain requirements that we meet. We were not treating them in accordance with that agreement, that MOU with the governor's office. We actually were calling an advisory board, again, not in conformance with 2022-07. So all this is a housekeeping. You can certainly create ad hoc committees at will, give them an assignment, a task, but once that is complete, it's done. And that's all this new ordinance says, is those tasks have been completed. For example, the Parks Advisory Board really had paid parks. That task is now completed. The budget is fairly limited right now. So to have meetings just to meet, if you'll give me more staff, I'll have them sit in those meetings. It's unnecessary at this time. So again, that's why I wanted to point out that you do have an ordinance at any time. If you wanted to continue that, we would amend it and create those boards. Now, Mayor.
Thank you. That's a better explanation than I was going to give. But I want to add to that another, and the question was asked of me earlier, and it tends to happen every time we have a meeting. I'll get questions about what's on the agenda that night. And it was why are we doing this? And if an hour a month per advisory board is not a lot to ask, and that's correct. There's not a lot to ask. If it were an hour a month, that would be more manageable. But I've seen it firsthand. I've been in here to come see Mr. Del Rosa about something. He'd be in a meeting, and it's all these pop-ins and phone calls and emails that he's getting from members of these advisory boards. And it's because that's the culture that was set by the previous management, is that everything funneled through that one individual, including these advisory boards, and they oversaw the advisory boards, and they drove that narrative and that agenda. And that's not the purpose of an advisory board. Those are advisory boards for citizens. And it's not, government doesn't need to get involved in that. But because that's what was hammered into them over the past however many years, they continue to do that and make phone call after phone call. And honestly, just overstepping their boundaries. We had one advisory board specifically went and met with a group that we were in negotiation. We were in contract negotiation with these people, and they went and didn't tell any of us on the board or village administrator that they were having this lunch meeting with these people that they didn't know that we were in contract negotiations with. That's not the role of a citizen advisory board. So that's just another example. This is as we've already laid out here tonight, we have other pressing matters And we're going to utilize all of our resources and time management to try to get this situation fixed. So that's another reason why we're doing this at this point. We're not doing away with them forever. We're just kind of putting them on hold, and we've even discussed, task forces of sorts if another project were to come up that we want to move forward with, and we do want. And my point to the gentleman that asked me the question earlier about that and about wanting to hear citizen input, I absolutely want to hear citizen input, and I think I've made that clear from the jump, even last year as an alderman, and then this year coming in and extending the public comment time to 5 minutes. I'm not trying to stifle anybody's voice. I want voices to be heard, but I also want to do it in an effective manner. Alderman Graham, you have any questions?
No questions.
Alderman Hurst?
No questions.
Alderman McDonald?
No questions, Mayor.
Mayor Pro Tem Bell?
Just real quick, are there any advisory boards we need to have right now that we don't have?
No, sir, I don't believe so. The only group that's really kind of functioning, and that's because we have an agreement with the school district, is the Salado Garden, can't think, but at the Civic Center. But they've been appointing their Alderman Mike McDonald heard today that they've been appointing their own folks. They kind of meet. We don't do minutes. I mean, they approve them amongst themselves. But unless you see a need for a specific task, Mayor Pro Tem, I don't see it at this current time. Well, a fundraising committee.
Okay, I'll open this up for public comments.
I'm Richard McClure at 2120 Susan Trail. I am a member, or have been a member of the Board of Advisory Board. I've been here in Salado for about 3.5 years and been on the board for about 2. In that time period, we've had 4 directors running for it. We've run through. Somewhere, tourism needs corporate money because somebody has, we have a new director now, and we have actually, for the first time here in the last 6 months, a working committee. Yes, that you did your meeting that you didn't know about. And I wasn't part of that, but I'm not going to comment either one way or the other on it. But at the same time, I've been on tourism board. We moved here from Maryland. I was on the state tourism board and my local county tourism board for a large number of years. It is something that in tourism, with the voice of it, that's how it works. There's a lot of money that comes from the hotel tax, and it needs to be spent wisely with people who have. And I'm not sure that's just great. You may need to assign people or find people for it, but I think some of the boards are needed for the dollars that heads in bed, and which is what tourism is about, the tourism tax. Because it's something that is here in this.
Thank you, sir. Anybody else?
I agree.
Name and address, please.
And I also,
Name and address, please.
Brian Sunshine, 926 North Ridge Road,
Thank you.
Salado, Texas. The Economic Development Committee was killed in January of 2022 for no apparent reason. Well, now we have economic development and we have no committee. It should have never been an ad hoc committee because we've got a lot of smart people. We have a lot of successful people here, business people that have grown business, bankers and lawyers and business owners. I don't know why economic development decisions should be made in a vacuum without tapping into the intellectual capital in this community. So I do support the continuation in whatever form it takes. Tourism, the Parks and Rec, and of economic development. I could take or leave the other one. But I think they're very important and vital to our success as a community so that we're not making decisions in a hole. And I do appreciate all of your service. That was not meant to be an attack on anything. My father served in the Air Force. My father-in-law served in Korea and Vietnam. And I appreciate your service. The point I was trying to make was I pay tax. And the decisions you make affect me. And you're not as impacted, but I do appreciate all of your service. That's it. Thank you. Please keep some of those committees going and be thoughtful about it. And rearrange them as you might, but I think they're important.
Linda Reynolds, 1110 Mill Creek Drive. I disagree with Brian. I'm happy to see you clear the board. I kind of wish we could do the same thing with planning and zoning. Those people have been on there a long time, but I know they're working on the comprehensive plan, so that may be a different issue. I have attended many of these committee meetings. Many of the people on them seem to think they're elected officials, number one. Number two, during Mr. McClure's tourism tenure, the tourism committee spent $20,000 illegally, which I won't get into, but the fact is $20,000 was handed out from the tourism committee inappropriately. So I'm happy to see you clear the board, please do what other previous administrations have not done. If you see the need for a committee, broadcast it publicly. Don't just go pick the people you want to be on the committee because they happen to be your buddy or your neighbor or you know they'll do what you want. Please open it up to the whole community because Brian is correct. There are a lot of very intelligent people here who know a lot, have brought a lot of information to the village, and could probably do a good job of supporting you. You just have to keep reminding them they are not elected. Even the planning and zoning board that seems to often want to tell you what to do, these are not elected people. You have to make the final decisions. And I appreciate all the work you do. Thank you.
Thank you. And, you know, some of the comments, Mrs. Rosa, is about the different directors over, you know, again, that's something that was previous culture. It wasn't just advisory boards, it was also city staff. When you go through 4 or 5 police chiefs under one administration, that is a pretty significant sign of what's really going on. So that's all I have about that. Any further? You got any more questions?
No questions.
Can I give a comment?
Sure.
I was the last person to sit on the Economic Development Committee, and Mr. Sunshine is correct. It did go away, and it was designed to be put away that way by the prior administration, and that's just the way it goes. All right. I will say this much. I am well aware of the depth of knowledge of our community. I see it every day in acts, merit, and deed. Okay. What I will also say is this. Advisory committees are designed to serve the public interest and to support the needs of the Board of Aldermen based on the task at hand. They are not personal playhouses to create your own pecking order in the community. For as much as Ms. Reynolds said about making sure that we pick the right people versus having a closed selection process, I do agree with the open selection process. But what I will say is currently right now, we don't have a selection process. You can be from Canton, Ohio and decide to join us because you're going to be here for a while based on the conversation. Just being honest. All right? I would hope that in the future when we do reenact these and as we bring them together, Mayor and Mr. De La Rosa, that we have a proper selection process put in place that's legal and bound, maybe even by ordinance, so that way we can keep it above board every time, each time, so we don't have these conversations ever again. So thank you, Mayor, for giving me this time.
Yes, sir. Mayor Pro Tem Bell.
Manny, just one quick question. Is there anything that keeps Ms. Whitson from contacting Mr. McClure and asking his advice on any topic dealing with tourism or anything?
No, there isn't. I'm trying to figure out who Ms.
Yeah.
Whitman was. Yes, I knew.
Yes.
She's
sitting right there.
She's the manager, yes.
Have y'all met?
Boy, he threw you under the bus in a hurry.
Who? No, sir, there is nothing, there is nothing but folks wanting to work with staff and give advice. And we need it. And Ms. McClure is right. We need some corporate. The last city we had the hotel owners or their executive, representative of their executive team on it, because the hotel motel funds represents that industry. This tourism board had none of those. And you get 7% from Holiday Inn and Days Inn, the two biggest hotels outside of our city limits. So, and no board or no manager in your previous policies indicated that they allocated hotel funds. I don't doubt what Mrs. Reynolds says, that it was misallocated. I was asked, who makes that decision? The Board of Aldermen always make that decision when it comes to hotel funds, because there's a law for it. Okay? When it comes to economic development, the Texas Economic Development Act requires that the governing body make all decisions, and most developments require NDAs. As a city manager, you see that I keep you informed on all developments. The cities do. Okay? So, whether it's a type A, type B, or a municipal development district, and I've worked with all of them. That transition type B to municipal development districts, which means that we have an economic development, we actually pull in the sales tax out of the ETJ. The problem here is you have a library district, so, and you have an ESC, so you've got some limitations, but all committees are always accountable. Even the Economic Development Corporation cannot act on itself, act on its own without submitting it to the governing body, which is you.
So if Ms. Whitman felt like she needed a committee to advise her on some topic or some project, she would just come to you and then.
And it can be done administratively
Right.
for our purposes. There are folks that have different skill sets that we could utilize. If they was more formalized, done by you, and you don't have procedures, bylaws, or it's going to get us into some issues when it comes to open meetings or open records.
And
That's why-
who's managing the coordination with music-friendly stuff?
Ms. Whitson continues to be that
You'll
liaison.
be doing that too, okay.
Yes, sir. So we will follow, and we believe that we should continue to be part of the music-friendly community. And that group has reached out to other groups, and they recognized that it was in their best interest, and they actually have much more latitude if they created their own 501(c), and that has already occurred. So actually, we're about to have an even better partnership with them. But Ms. Deanna Whitson will continue to be that liaison.
They are the ones that came to us.
They did.
They requested a meeting with myself and Mr. Del Rosa, Richard Paul Thomas and his team, a part of his team, came in, and they've created another organization that's going to fall under that same, or that music-friendly community will fall under that umbrella, and requested that they, I guess, offered it up as an option to kind of back out as an advisory board. And we said, yeah, we would encourage it, and I think it's still a mutually beneficial relationship, and we're going to continue to help them in any way that we can, but we don't need to oversee their meetings. That's what it comes down to. So, any more questions? I'll open the floor for a motion. Oh. Okay, thank you. If there are no more questions, I'll entertain a motion.
Make a motion to approve as written.
Motion made by Alderman Hurst to approve as written and seconded by Alderman Graham. Any further discussion?
Question.
Question been called by Alderman McDonald. All in favor of approval of action item E as written, say yes.
Yes.
Any opposed? Passes 4-0, Ms. Bean. Item F, discuss some possible action to approve ordinance 2024-17, an ordinance of the Village of Salado, Texas, establishing utility service terms and conditions outside the village municipal limits and providing findings of fact, effective date, repealer, severability clause, and proper notice and meeting. Mr. De La Rosa.
Okay, this is an ordinance to kind of add some clarity to our position when it comes to our certificated area for our wastewater. So you are issued a wastewater certificate of convenience and necessity by the Public Utility Commission of Texas. We recently, and let me explain, as a municipality, as a city, you are not required to have a water CCN or sewer CCN, just by the nature that you are a municipality, you are government. Okay, the reasons the certificated areas were at one time exclusive, and this goes back up, I recall in the middle of 2000s, it's been a little over 20 years when at the time it was probably TNRTC was regulated, and then afterwards TCQ now. So what's happened is you can have dually certified areas. Okay, in other words, we have Salado Water Supply Corporation, that's the water CCN, another one can actually have an overlapping, and that's allowed by TCQ, dually certificate areas. Look at their website. A certificate area, we provide a map, and that map is actually a photography filed with the Public Utility Commission of Texas. The PUCT regulates water, sewer, and electricity. We currently sent a bill for $309,000 to the developer. Didn't pay its impact fee. Want to kind of see what its take was going to be. Mayor sat in on that because you were invited. I don't generally invite you, but if you get invited and somebody wants you to sit in, you are more than welcome to sit in these meetings. But here's what it was. Can you give me a copy of the map? Because the map that you have on your ordinance doesn't show that I'm in that certificate area, so I don't owe you impact fees. So I had to explain the state statute. Okay? Then I went on. I said, you know what? I'm going to create an ordinance that puts no doubt in your mind. So this is what it is. If you request annexation, if you request wastewater service, it requires annexation. Whether you're wholly or partly in the city, so you will be in. That leaves no doubt, and I don't have to go try to look at the state statute and those kind of things. So it adds clarity, it adds position, because when you added, let's say, the Eagle Heights area, I don't know if the map is updated. Certainly it wasn't updated on the eastern side of I-35 when we've taken in some of these subdivisions. It's costly, right? Developers don't want to pay that. You're gonna incur some legal and some engineering costs to update the maps. It's nice to have because you want to protect your boundaries, but who else is going to provide wastewater? Is it coming in from the Cheech area? So in other words, it's not something that needs to be done immediately. But this certainly will take any doubt from anybody requesting wastewater that you must annex. Based on that, I recommend approval as presented.
Thank you, sir. Alderman Graham, you have any questions?
No questions.
Alderman Hurst.
No questions.
Alderman McDonald.
Galvanize the program. Thank you, Mr. De La Rosa. No question.
Mayor Pro Tem Bell. Any public comments?
This was adopted by the Board of Aldermen in Texas. It may have been important that you request to that.
And Mr. Flush, I don't doubt it, but there are 6 ordinances that I'm reading through. Yeah, it's all. So if it is, I didn't catch it, but this certainly will at least add that clarity that there's no doubt.
Thank you. Anybody else? Okay, I'll go to floor for a motion. Motion made by Mayor Pro Tem Bell to approve as written.
Second.
Seconded by Alderman McDonald. Any further discussion?
Question.
Question called by Alderman Graham. All in favor of approving item F as written, say yes.
Yes.
Yes. Any opposed? Ms. Bean, that passes 4-0. Item G, discuss and possible action to approve ordinance number 2024-18, an ordinance of the Village of Salado, Texas, amending ordinance number 2019-15, amending the method for the calculation of the fees charged in the Village of Salado for building permits and inspection fees, and providing findings of fact, effective date, repealer, severability clause, and proper notice and meeting. Mr. De La Rosa.
Okay, this ordinance is actually to get us in line with our contract with Bureau Veritas for building plan review and building inspection. So a few months ago when I arrived, we actually amended it to allow for some engineering and related stuff as the building inspection is going through there. So, but you have been subsidizing probably Bureau Veritas for some time on any construction because your rate schedule was not in line. So this actually was identified, one or two items by our auditor back a few months back. So what I did is I actually looked at the ordinance. Your ordinance is based on a calculating one permit based on valuations, either residential or commercial. It's got a rate structure for it, same thing that Bureau Veritas does. The International Code Council actually allows you to collect for the building permit that encompasses all the components, plus a plumbing permit and mechanical, electrical, all separate. The codes allow that. It also has penalties for starting construction before a permit is issued. And there's also a clause in there about in the building code that if you don't start your project, well, once you start, the project is only, and you stop. Once it gets stalled for 180 days, you have to reapply, pay new permit fees. Okay? Since I've come on board, I've noticed people starting without permits, right? There's no penalty clause. This now has it, the industry standard is twice the fee. Okay, so you'll see it in the matrix. As a matter of fact, it is on attachment A, you'll see items 1 and 2 at the very top, right below where it says, attachment A, 2 says it cannot be, valid, and the fees are paid, and then the next one is you commence before it's issued. Okay, so that'll certainly at least get people in here. What I did is I adopted currently the at least presented contractually what we're doing based on the calculations. I did leave some of your ordinance about anything less than 150 square feet at $75. We may subsidize a little bit if somebody wanted to put in a small project, right? A fence, right? Not a lot, but here's the problem with a fence. People don't stay on their property, right? Without a survey where it's at, people complain. So it's still going to go sent to the Bureau Veritas, and we look at the rates, and it's a small job. We start off at $150, but again, that covers Bureau Veritas' time and their entire valuation. It doesn't cover the admin time, which is why we're proposing a 20% administrative fee on top of that, which is an industry standard. So this kind of allow for small projects a little bit of latitude, but it certainly protects us when we're dealing with either custom home or tract home builders. Get your paperwork in and get it done, and we're going to be much more on top of these things. But if not, there are penalties for these kind of matters. So that doesn't mean that at some future date we won't look at a different company. We're not, contractually we're connected to Bureau Veritas. They're not the only company that does this. This is not the only formula that's out there. And we would certainly would like to pass that on to our customers. But right now, this is what we have, and we need to meet that contractual obligation and collect that we're collecting enough to pay for our costs and not subsidizing it. Based on that, I recommend approval as presented to you.
Thank you, sir. Alderman Graham, do you have any questions?
No questions.
Alderman Hurst. No questions. Alderman McDonald.
No questions, Mayor. Thank you.
Mayor Pro Tem Bell.
Just when we do this and we receive these funds, how are they being allocated?
These funds are just collected and they go into our general fund. This is not set for any one property. So, for example, when we get a bill from Bureau Veritas, we attempt to reconcile it, see how much we collected, what the fees are. What this also does, it allows us to be able to collect for like a reinspection. There's a reinspection team that was, I sent the billings and I sent it to you. It was either 76.25, 79.25. It's something, it was an odd number. So it's a reinspection. Every time it fails, and some it fell 2 or 3 times because I hear about it from Bureau Veritas, well, we pay that fee every time. So this will allow us to continue. Is we collect for the fee at one time. It goes into our general fund. We're not treating every home as an account. It just goes straight into our account based on that valuation. If I determine, and it says here, the building official may require the applicant to verify and declare the value of the project. That's in the building code. That's not it. We're just making that statement. You may or may not believe it, but some builders tell you that they build it a lot cheaper and the valuation is a lot less than what it is. And if we see that, we will ask for document records in accordance with Chapter 1 of every one of those building-related codes. Okay? We pay it out when we get a bill. We just saw the most recent one to Bureau Veritas for the ending month of July with $17,300 in there. I think he signed a check in it today. Okay? So one time, and it's got a reconciliation of every property that they're at, and we try to compare these things. But so we're improving that process now.
Do we need a system in place that when because we would receive the building stuff from the builder up front. We'd receive funds from him up front for the building, right?
Not generally, no. So for example, I got the proposed plans for the Barton House project today. It came in PDF over the weekend. There was no funds. They went through PDF to send it to us. But we're looking at certain issues, right? I just did a preliminary review. I know where Barton House is at. I see that long rectangular area in front of it where the buildings are going. I see the proposed detention pond on the backside. I think there's a creek or something that's back there. I don't know if it can be utilized for detention or not. I don't see the parking ratios outlined because that area, Rock Creek, I already get complaints of people that live behind there and people using Rock Creek to park on. So the roadway on the northern side is that east-west. So, and again, I'm not the plan reviewers are going to look at the building plan. They're not going to look at it peripherally, whether it fits there. They're not going to look at all the parking spaces because that's in your subdivision ordinance and not in your building code ordinance. They're not going to look at the zoning issues that it fit. They may not even know that they got to send it to the Salado Historical Society as a pre-requirement in part of that historic overlay ordinance. So all of these things require staff at some level to look at what we've got. But Epperton, there was no funds that came in, and that happens a lot with our plats. They submit them thinking that you're just going to keep moving forward, and we're putting the brakes on.
So we issue a permit, and they go off and do whatever they're doing, and then they finish, and we do an inspection. And then Veritas bills us for the inspection, and then we go back and get it from.
No. This is collected up front. The only thing that is not collected up front are the inspections, the re-inspections, and those will be collected before we send anybody back out.
Okay, so we are collecting money up front.
You were, but not at the correct structure. You were collecting it based on your ordinance and not on your agreements with Bureau Veritas. So in other words, it wasn't adopted by ordinance.
So when we receive that money, it's going in our general fund. And do we offset like a future account payable knowing that money's going to have to go out?
That's not the way your system is set up. No.
But should be.
That's not a common practice. No, it's not. You can. I understand what it is.
Going out the door.
Yeah.
We know we're going to get a bill for that money that we receive.
Yes, sir. But based on your current agreement for contract services, when I had a staff of 11 in my last finance department, we could do a lot more tracking. You have a contract for accounting basically on a part-time with a limited scope. So to track it, it's a lot more time. So The way it's going is the most efficient based on your resources available for it.
Just want to be sure we're tracking the money and not
Yeah,
winding up in the
yeah.
same boat. too.
Now, so a lot of it's got to be, you got to catch it up on the front end. What is the valuation? Is it accurate? You know, and some of it is, we know what construction costs is for commercial and residential. Is it in that ballpark? Is it fairly close? If the numbers are way off, then we start asking for documents. I grew up in the construction industry. So I worked at so I mean, that's why when I'm looking at these, I know exactly if they're hitting those amounts. And you bought properties or built homes. We all know what those construction costs should be hitting.
All right, any further questions? Nope. I'll open the floor for a motion.
Make a motion that we approve ordinance number 2024-18 as presented.
Motion made by Alderman Graham to approve as presented, seconded by Alderman Hurst. Any further discussion?
Question.
Question called by Alderman McDonald. All in favor of approving item G as written, say yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Any opposed? Being that passes 4-0. Next item on the agenda is adjournment. I'll take a motion.
Motion to adjourn?
Adjourn. Thank you.
Rodney, I was waiting on you. I thought you were going to adjourn.